Today, the war crossed a line that could change many things in the Middle East. The heart of Iran's gas industry was struck, and there was a deadly attack last night here in the center of Israel. And at the same time, the Strait of Hormuz remains a pressure point that can affect the entire region and also the whole world. And when you put all these pieces together, you understand that we're no longer just seeing a missile war, but a war that's starting to affect energy, the economy, and strategic routes. Greetings, I'm Ari, and we're on day 19 of the war. The most important thing, without a doubt, is the attack on the gas facilities in Iran, because this wasn't just any strike, nor just another one in the routine of bombings we've seen in recent days. Joint forces from the United States and Israel carried out an attack on the largest natural gas processing plant, not only in Iran, but in the entire world. We're talking about the plant connected to the South Pars fields, the offensive. It struck critical infrastructure in the South Pars complex and also industrial nodes in Asaluya, in Bushehr province. And here we need to pause for a moment to understand the magnitude of all this. South Pars is not a secondary facility. South Pars is a central piece of the Iranian energy system. For us to understand the magnitude of the event, we need to know that this field provides between 70% and 75% of the country's natural gas of Iran, and also around 80% of the entire Iranian power grid depends on this resource. In other words, we're not just talking about hitting a refinery to damage the regime's propaganda image. We're talking about hitting a real artery of Iran's internal functioning. Gas means electricity, industry, supply, stability, and the state's ability to maneuver. That's why this attack carries a different weight. Until now, the war had been hitting command centers, depots, launchers, military installations, and key figures of the regime. But when energy infrastructure is targeted, the message changes. The message is that it's no longer just about weakening Iran's offensive capability or raising the internal cost of the war for the regime itself. And here comes a point that is really very important to analyze objectively. This attack not only affects Iran internally, it also opens a new phase of regional repercussions. Iran's response was swift. The Fars agency spoke of an alleged strategic suicide by the enemy, that is, by the United States and Israel. And they said that from this moment on, the war shifted from a limited conflict to a large-scale and open economic war. Furthermore, the Iranian message was that the energy security of the entire region had dropped to zero and was completely compromised. In other words, Tehran is now asserting what it had promised, that if its energy heart was touched, it would respond by threatening the energy heart, but of the entire Gulf. And that connects directly with the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, because Hormuz is one of the most sensitive points on the planet. It's a route through which a huge part of the oil and gas that leaves the Persian Gulf passes. So all of this is happening at the same time. An underground facility near Hormuz was destroyed. I'll discuss this shortly. And also, Iran starts issuing warnings against energy facilities in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. In other words, what's taking shape is quite clear. The war is starting to shift from pure military action to strategic pressure on global energy. How can we interpret all of this? Well, Iran understands that on the direct military front, it's taking very hard and decisive hits. And that's why it tries to shift part of the cost to an area where it can immediately generate international fear, which is energy. Because if it can't impose deterrence on Israel and the United States through military means, it will try to do so by raising the regional and global cost of the war. But at the same time, that move is very dangerous for the regime itself, because threatening the energy flow from the Gulf. Because it not only puts Iran against Israel or Washington, it also puts it at odds with Arab countries, who don't necessarily want to be dragged into a regional conflict of this magnitude. And that's the key that many don't take into account. This attack on gas not only hurts Iran, it can also force uncomfortable decisions throughout the region. At the same time, the Air Force eliminated 5 soldiers of the Iranian regime in western Iran. According to the report, they were identified through precise intelligence and in real time while they were operating in a military facility and were then attacked. This is another example of something that has been seen for days now: the depth of intelligence penetration and the speed with which Israel is turning information into operational action. Before I dive in, I want to share with you the story of this vial, which amazed me and I think you should know about too. This vial holds an unbelievable story that was unheard until now. Inside is earth from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, rescued by archaeologists after thousands of years of history were dumped as rubble. It is our opportunity to prevent history from disappearing. Start the new year with a personal connection to Jerusalem. Click the link in bio or scan the code to enjoy a special offer. At the same time, Israel confirmed another major blow against the regime's leadership: the elimination of Ismail Qatif, Iran's Minister of Intelligence. There were conflicting reports at first, but the elimination was eventually confirmed. For his part, Bahrain's Minister of Defense reported that the country has been targeted by 130 missiles and 234 drones launched from Iran so far in the war. This information is important because it reminds us of something that sometimes gets lost when we focus only on what is happening here in Israel. This war has a very broad regional scope. It is not a contained exchange between two isolated actors. It's a confrontation that's shaking several points in the Gulf and threatens to keep expanding its effects. If you look at it in strategic terms, this already has clear features of a regional war. And that kind of scenario has historically been considered the prelude to crises that can drag the whole world in if they are not contained. Now, let's go to Israel. Last night was another very tough night. Since very early, the IDF had informed the public about a possible joint attack against Israel during the night hours. I shared that with you in yesterday's video. Well, that's how it was. There were joint attacks from Iran, from Lebanon, and today also from Yemen. The most painful event was the deadly attack in Ramat Gan. 2 elderly people died. According to the reports released this morning, they were hit by shrapnel after an interception very close to the shelter, practically just a few meters away from reaching safety. They simply didn't make it to the shelter. And this scene says a lot about the reality being experienced here in Israel. Even when the systems intercept, the danger doesn't disappear completely. Shrapnel, the remains of the interceptions, and fragments of ammunition keep falling on urban areas and obviously can injure or even kill someone. In addition to Ramat Gan, during the night, remains of munitions and shrapnel also fell in several areas in the center of the country. In Holon, damaged vehicles were reported, some even on fire. In Beit Dagan, a fire broke out in a hangar after the fall of weapon debris. And the police, border guards, and artillerymen continued working in several areas of the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. In other words, it wasn't just the tragic incident in Ramat Gan. It was a night when several areas in the center felt very clearly that every interception in the sky can have consequences on the ground. You're witnessing a miracle in the video on screen. In the city of Petah Tikva, an entire family left their car to look for shelter once the alarms started going off. Minutes later, when they came out of the shelter, they found this scene. Their car had been hit by the remains of an intercepted missile. This case leaves a clear lesson: following the protocol saves lives. And I can attest to the fact that Israeli society as a whole is very disciplined. Otherwise, today the number of fatalities would be in the thousands. Now, something very important. If you value these updates and want to stay informed about what is happening here in Israel and in the region, then subscribe right now. You just need to click the button that says subscribe. Also, click the bell so you'll know when I upload a new video. Also know that memberships are available, which give you access to a private news group on WhatsApp where we share information, videos, and images every day. We're really always up to date with what's happening, and we always share it through the news group on WhatsApp. All right, continuing with today, Wednesday, Alarms have sounded in different parts of the country due to attacks from Iran, Lebanon, and also from Yemen. That is, the pressure hasn't decreased. The first reports after one of the attacks from Iran indicated that a residential building was damaged. There was destruction at the site, and firefighters worked conducting searches to locate possible people trapped. Up to the moment I'm making this video, no injuries have been reported. Sirens also sounded throughout the north, where several wildfires were reported due to impacts in open areas and from interception debris, including areas of the Golan Heights, Galilee, and Haifa. That also needs to be emphasized. The impact is not always measured only by deaths or injuries. Sometimes the goal is to open more fronts of attrition, cause fires, overwhelm emergency services, and keep the population in constant tension, both in the north and south of the country. Another important fact of the day was the damage suffered by 3 private planes parked at Ben Gurion Airport due to shrapnel from interceptions after several Iranian missile attacks. There were no casualties, but one of the aircraft was completely burned. Dismantling an image that does not go unnoticed because Ben Gurion Airport is a very sensitive symbol, and Iran has targeted the airport. Here we are talking about private aircraft and not a total operational collapse. It is, however, another sign of how far the side effects of this war can reach. Even in places that represent mobility, normalcy, and connection with the world. And be careful, because I've already seen fake propaganda showing Ben Gurion Airport partially destroyed. If you receive these images, pictures, or videos, don't share them, they're fake. Remember that Iran and the anti-Israeli propaganda coming from different Arab countries spend a whole lot of money on this information war. All right, to put all this into perspective, the general feeling today in Israel has been that the entire map is still under pressure. North, center, south of the country, metropolitan areas, peripheral zones, and strategic points. All of this keeps the population in a constant state of alert. All right, now let's move to the Lebanon front. The situation kept escalating. From Lebanon, they confirmed that Israel attacked Beirut 3 times during the night. For their part, Hezbollah claimed to have carried out 51 military operations against Israel, detailing launches and various attacks supposedly aimed at IDF forces. As always, with this kind of announcement, what Hezbollah proclaims is one thing, and the real effect on the ground is another. But what is clear is that the northern front remains completely active and far from cooling down. On the contrary, it is escalating more and more every day. On the Israeli side, Defense Minister Israel Katz announced that the IDF attacked and destroyed 2 additional bridges over the Litani River in southern Lebanon. According to Israel, these bridges were used for weapons smuggling and for the movement of Hezbollah operatives to the south. Last week, another bridge had already been attacked, and now the stated intention is to continue striking crossings in the area in order to disrupt the movement of the terrorist organization. In addition, during the night, the IDF attacked numerous Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, including launchers, launch squads, weapons depots, and operational command centers. After last night's attacks by the terrorist organization, Israel struck weapons depots and command centers integrated within civilian populations in the city of Tyre. Also in Beirut, more assets of the Al-Qar al-Hassan Association, which operates as Hezbollah's bank, were attacked, and the Israeli Navy struck command centers of the Iman Hussein Division in southern Lebanon. Also, an attack targeted a top official in Beirut. All of this together gives a pretty clear picture of the moment we're going through. On one hand, Iran is being hit in terms of energy, missiles, military personnel, and intelligence apparatus. On the other hand, it is trying to respond by expanding the regional threat, including the energy sector in the Gulf, and keeping pressure on Israel with direct attacks and through its allies. At the same time, Hezbollah remains fully involved in the equation, not as a decorative actor, but as a real front that forces Israel to pay attention and deploy military power. The question, then, is not just what happened today. The question is what kind of war is taking shape. Because if the attack on South Pars marks the visible beginning of a more open economic and strategic war, And if Hormuz remains the point where energy, trade, and regional deterrence intersect, then what comes next could affect far more countries than those currently firing or being fired upon. Here in Israel, the feeling is exactly that. We are in a phase where every night can bring a new surprise, and it's no longer enough to watch just one front. We have to keep an eye on Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, the Gulf, energy, and also the internal resilience of the civilian populations who continue to pay the cost of this war. We'll have to see now if Iran decides to turn its threats into more direct actions. And we'll also have to see how far Israel and the United States are willing to keep pushing against the regime's strategic infrastructure. Because once a certain line is crossed, going back is not simple. Let me know in the comments what your take is on this whole moment we're living through. Are we witnessing the beginning of an even more open regional war? Or do you think that these harsh blows could actually end up forcing some kind of restraint? I'd like to read your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining me for another update. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like if you find this content useful, and of course, share this video. See you next time.